Great, we're going to get started with the session. I'm very excited to have Barb Moffat and Vivian Day, and unfortunately not Dragana Miskovich because she is out organizing a really large exam at this point, so she couldn't be with us today. But we also have Amanda McKenzie here from the Office of Academic Integrity. She's going to be talking a bit as well if we have questions about things that are specifically around academic integrity issues. So what we're talking about today at this Learn User group is the use of Turnitin as a learning tool. So I think a lot of us are pretty familiar with using Turnitin as a plagiarism detection tool. But a couple of courses in biology decided to try and using it for drafts of student assignments so the students could actually look at the originality reports themselves and think a bit about maybe the issues that they were having with those documents that they'd handed in and have a chance to fix some of those before they did it again. So Barb and Vivian are going to tell us about that and about maybe some of the research that's come out of that, because there's been some feedback from students and instructors. I'm hoping that we have people out in internet land through our live stream link. If you have questions for the presenters and you're out there, please email Mary Power, and her email address is m2power@uwaterloo.ca. And she will manage any questions that come in and make the presenters aware of it. And I don't know, Vivian and Barb, do you mind if people interrupt you, or would you like to hold stuff to the end?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
No? Okay, great.
Fine.
All right, well, over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jane. I'd like to say good afternoon, everyone. My name's Vivian Day. I'm a lecturer in the biology department. Been teaching for a number of years now, and the course that I'm going to be talking a little bit about is an upper year level course, and some of the things that I've done with this course for the first time last fall term. But I thought I'd at least start by posing a quick question to everyone here. How many of you have writing assignments within your courses? Does anyone have written assignments in their courses? Yeah, a few people have written assignments in their courses. Now, how many of you have had a chance to use Turnitin in the past, or how familiar? Okay, looks like lots of people are familiar with Turnitin. Fantastic. Okay, so I thought I would give you first off a little bit of background on the course that I used Turnitin, and then also modified it ever so slightly for the first time last fall term. So the course itself is my fourth year animal cell biotechnology course. It's biology 483. Typically the class size for 483 is about 80 to 84 students per term, so it's a fairly large course. Within that course I do have 2 written assignments, but these are done in groups. So again, to make it a little bit more manageable, groups of 3 to 4 form right at the very beginning, first week or so of the term. And those groups choose a cell line to work on for the first writing assignment. So they have to tell me a little bit about what the cell line is, where did it come from, what part of the body, what types of cells they are, and a little bit of history on that cell line. And then the second writing assignment is on some discoveries, research that's done. It's a little bit more like a synthesis of all of the various discoveries that were done using that cell line, brought together. So my hope is that those students would use a number of primary research articles and be able to synthesize that together into this report. Now, I've started teaching that course in 2006, and around 2009, caught wind of Turnitin, and thought, I'll try Turnitin for the first time. So Turnitin itself, as many of you know, it's a plagiarism detection tool. It's looking at matching text to other sources that are either journal articles, peer-reviewed articles, internet sources, or other deposited sources within the Turnitin database. So I've adopted that in 2009, and for both of those writing assignments, I had the students submit their final versions into a Turnitin Dropbox. And again, what would come out from that is what's called an Originality Report, and I would be able to look at that text matching and see how did the text match, if there was any possible issues on perhaps plagiarism with other sources, whether they were credited or not credited sources within the reference. The one thing, though, that I didn't do was my students did not actually see their originality reports. Only I could view the originality reports, and as I was working my way through those reports, the students didn't know what was going on. They weren't able to really see that response, whether or not it actually showed any highlighted areas that may have had some possible text matching. So with a class size of around 80 to 84 or so, I would have about 20 to 21 to maybe 22 groups, and they would deposit that. And I did, over the years, since 2009, would have occasional group plagiarism. Now those would be brought to the Associate Dean, and because the writing assignments themselves were hefty, higher percent stakes, it was, and it's a fourth-year course, there was a lot at stake if plagiarism was detected, and that was then a breach of academic integrity that we do take quite seriously here at the University of Waterloo. So, in fall 2014, after having some chats with my colleague Barb Moffat, I decided to implement this draft Turnitin Dropbox. So this is what it would look like. It was the first implementation in fall 2014. For those of you perhaps at the back, maybe a little bit difficult to see, my two writing assignments, assignment number 1 and assignment number 2, each had a draft version Dropbox and a final version Dropbox. Now, for that draft version Dropbox, students were provided some information on how to deposit their draft. And it doesn't matter how rough their draft is, it would be the copy of their group assignment that they wanted to check and make sure was okay for if there's any issues revolving around plagiarism. So the draft version and the final version were due on the same day, but so they were open at the exact same time. I didn't seem to have too many issues with students. There weren't actually any issues with students mistaking the draft version for the final version. So thankfully, within those 20 groups, the 17 that decided to use the draft version Dropbox, they did deposit them nice and correctly in the draft version, even though the final version was nice and open for them. Now, the detailed instructions sheet that was created by Barb, Christine Zaza, myself, and Mary Power, we put this draft Originality Report detailed instructions on how to use the Dropbox and how to read the resulting Originality Report, because these students were able to, for the draft Dropbox, see an Originality Report that Turnitin produces and be able to delve into that Originality Report and determine whether or not they did have any issues in terms of the text matching and plagiarism. So I took a little snapshot of a part of this detailed instructions. How do I see the Originality Report? So again, this is just a little clip where you can see here, this would be the PDF document. It could also be a Word document submitted to the Dropbox. That would be, if you clicked on that link, you would actually pull up the document itself. That's not what the student actually wants to view in order to see the Originality Report. Instead, they were given a percentage, right beside, this says 18%, and then they have this colored square beside the percentage. Clicking on that colored square would bring up the actual Originality Report. And again, we do have this wonderful detailed instructions that we will be able to make available if anybody wants to take a look at them. The coloration would give you an idea of how much of that document matches outside text. So blue, sort of between 0 and 20, green, yellow, orange, and then red. Definitely lots of matching text within those orange and reds. The one caveat that I would say, though, in looking at those Originality Reports, a percentage, 1%, or something that says 40%, really doesn't give you an idea of what the Originality Report looks like. You can't sort of say, well, I'm not going to view any Originality Reports less than 10%, or I'm only going to view those that are higher than 60%. And you'll see why in just a few moments. But we tell the students that even though they've got this, look at the percent, you think, okay, 1%, everything's okay, or 2%, but no real percentage or color in that report can tell you whether or not the text has been plagiarized. But what you would do is click on that colored square and bring up the Originality Reports. So for the fall 2014 group, those students did have that opportunity for the first time to be able to click on their draft submission and see the originality report. And so I pulled one of my groups. This is group 10. Their originality report, 34%. So again, some instructors decide I'm not going to view certain percentages lower than, might just completely discount that. But 34%, on the other hand, you might think, oh, that's quite a bit. I should really look into this one. So I decided to pull up this document. You can see it's a document file, a docx file. First page, all that's really highlighted, it's quite light, but in purple you can see here, Eagle's minimum essential medium, supplemented with fetal bovine serum. So it's small little snippets. Not such a big deal for those little tiny snippets. This is easy text, nothing big. Nothing on the second page. Okay, so where's this 34% coming from? The references. Okay? Now there is an ability to be able to turn off the bibliography within Turnitin. Myself, I do include it just because I want to be able to see how things are matching. But I know you can do that. But for a lot of times, you might have 34% and originally think, oh, there's a big problem. But it might just all be in the references. On the flip side, you might also have a very low originality report. And a few sentences is only equal to 2 or 3%. And that is like maybe completely copied word from word from a source, which again is a problem. So students in my class really only had one opportunity to be able to deposit that draft report into the Dropbox and see their originality report. Once it came back, they had an opportunity to be able to make a decision on whether or not to change that document at all or not at all. It was completely up to them. But only the final version Dropbox was used for grading. So I myself didn't go into the originality reports, the individual originality reports for the draft submissions to peruse through them. Still haven't done that. But for the final version, each of those originality reports were quickly scanned to see if there were any issues. Now, for most of those originality reports, I did actually see a decrease from the draft version to the final version that was put in the Dropbox. But it was actually quite interesting that all of the students in the course, all of the groups had the opportunity to be able to deposit a draft version, but only 17 out of the 21 actually decided to submit a draft version. So there were some groups that decided not to do that. But the groups that did submit, they do tend to submit the draft about 3 to 4 days before the due date, before they have the final draft that's actually due, because you never know. The Turnitin originality report may only take a short period of time to actually be generated, but sometimes it may take a longer length of time. So we always tell the students to be able to submit a little bit early so that they've got a chance to process the originality report, take a look through, and then make modifications as needed. Now that being said, in using Turnitin, we do have to provide them an opportunity to not use Turnitin if they do please, or they don't want to. Within my course, the way that I pose this to the students is if they don't want to use the Turnitin Dropbox, I do ask them to provide me with a paper copy of the report and then print off all of their references and highlight what areas of those references that they've actually used to be able to synthesize their document that they've submitted to me. So my questions for me, or in terms of reflections, was did this reduce the number of plagiarism cases? Well, I didn't have any last term, which to me is quite nice because again, it's a 4th-year course. There are fairly high stakes with this. Students are getting to the point where about graduation time. So at least for round number 1, I didn't have any plagiarism cases go forward for neither of the 2 assignments from my last term. Now, my other reflection questions were sort of what are we teaching the students and are they learning? And again, I'm still reflecting on this because giving them that opportunity to change their version of their document, Are they just tweaking it ever so slightly so that it's not matching? Or are they realizing that, yes, this is perhaps something that I need to rethink and put together a new part of that document? So again, still sort of debating on whether or not they're actually learning. The one key thing, though, that I would say is in fourth year may not be the time to actually start this in terms of implementation. So I'm actually quite pleased that this was also done in a first-year course, and my colleague Barb Moffitt's going to be able to talk about implementing this into a first-year course and then seeing that maybe perhaps it won't have issues in later years. Okay. Thank you.
You were great. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to be presenting on behalf of Dragana Miskovic. I'm very sorry that she can't be the person to be here because she has been an unflagging participant in trying to help students in first year in biology be successful in both the lab and in writing lab reports. And I have been her co-pilot because I end up doing the investigations for the Faculty of Science for Policy 71 mishaps. And so we've kind of we're trying to be proactive. I find in talking to students, it's less about giving them a penalty, it's more helping them recognize and own their error and move forward. And this is a very large course. I thought I'd just tell you a bit about it, but it's a cell biology course, and what I'm talking about here is the lab. We're also using Turnitin in the lecture portion, but it's a large enrollment course, and it's about the first time that the students have had a written lab report assignment. And in order to help that process, Dragana has 2 lab reports, one at very low stakes, 5%, and the second report being higher stakes is 20%. So you can see we're trying to step up on the expectation and the performance. So I'll take you through a few of the issues that we were trying to deal with and then tell you about the strategy, because it's a multi-part strategy and Turnitin is really only one part of that. Very large enrollment course, you can see here, with students taking it from from just about all faculties for different reasons. Some of the engineering students are those either moving from in a non-degree term into science, or they are doing an option to perhaps go to professional school, if you're wondering why some of these folks are doing this. So some of these students are broadening, taking it as elective or moving into science. Over the course of the term, 40 students dropped, again, from all those different faculties. Their experience in writing lab reports is quite variable based on their high school experience, so some of them have actually done written lab reports. And in fact, in some high schools, the students will tell me that they actually use Turnitin. So some of them already even know about it. Our biggest point here, really, is they have very little experience in reading the primary literature and in synthesizing that information and citing the resources they used. Okay, the synthesis word. They're so focused on paraphrasing. And paraphrasing in their world is let's get a sentence and let's get the thesaurus out and change a couple of words and Bob's your uncle, I've got my thing done. And so they grab paragraphs. Many of the students I meet on the lower, on having made mistakes, they grab certain paragraphs and then change the words. They either forget to change the words or whatever. So what I really would stress to any instructor listening to this is we're really trying to encourage them to synthesize that information. Could they own the idea rather than use this paraphrase? So when working on your course syllabi, try to stress synthesis. What does it mean to really go home and tell your roommate what you did in the lab report, okay? And then citing your references, we have a real issue on what is common knowledge, or what really needs to be cited, and then linking what the person actually said, reading the actual document versus somebody's reference of it. We repeat our experiments from year to year. Okay, mea culpa. They are very large labs. It takes a lot to start new experiments. So it is very true there are hundreds of copies of these reports available or whether they're siblings, friends, boyfriends, previous students, course hero, whatever. And then another big piece is there's a big hesitation on the parts of our TAs to grade according to a marking scheme. They do not want to be the bad guy. And so they want to have little private conversations. They want to just hope that it gets fixed. They want to say, oh, that's a first-year student. I don't want to do anything. So they don't want to give a bad grade, and they don't want to report. So they're two different things. One is giving an honest grade to the student, and the student at least gets some chance at reflection, but then there's the chance of reporting that. So we have had, and this is, this hesitation is quite obvious when you look at the number of reported cases. So we're talking of a class of, 800-900 first-year students with no experience writing, and up to 2012 we've got look at that, 1 or 2 cases. So you get an idea that there's a problem. So and not that I'm all about trying to get people. I work pretty hard on trying to teach integrity when I have meetings with students, rather than telling them that they're bad people or devious, which they're not. So if we look at the grades that they've had over the term, the past few years, you can see that the grades are very high. So there's 2 concerns here for Dragana. No improvement in the grades from the first report to the second. So where's the learning? Like, are we? And the biggest one that bothered, well, these are both of equal concern, but the first report written by a first-year student is getting a 75% grade. So again, kind of comes back to the marking on, and not how well-meaning our TAs are, but just what kind of feedback we're giving students. In 2008, we had a student who had TA'd this course multiple times, and he was doing the Center for Teaching Excellence teaching certificate. I don't know if I said that right, but the teaching certificate that graduate students could do. He was really engaged TA, and developed an in-class marking assignment, peer marking, for the first report. So students hand in this 5% report, 2 copies, and in the first, they hand one in, and at that same day the other copy is passed out amongst the class and walked through the marking process with the TA. And so that grade doesn't count, but there were a lot of aha moments the TAs reported of, oh, that's what they meant. And so they did that after they'd done the report once, because, it always looks easy if you tell someone before you think you're going to do it. So kind of letting them step in it modestly and try that. So didn't see a big change in the grading, but felt that that's still an activity that is done in the class. So now I'll tell you the steps that we've used to try and mitigate these issues. And so really Turnitin is not being used here as a catch-ya tool, but as one part of this strategy. So one was to try and prepare students for the expectations of what was going to happen in first-year labs. And I'm really pleased that all the instructors of first-year classes in chemistry, physics, and earth have participated in this, but with the help of the Student Success Office and Andrea Pryor in particular, we've put together a Learn community for science students that provides this kind of information. And on one page, we have videos of what it looks like in class, videos of what it looks like in a lab, and each instructor provided how you're going to write a lab report. So hopefully a little bit of proactive information. The analytics on Learn don't really let me look too much at how that's been accessed, but and it's always a little disappointing that it's not everybody. So even if they had accurate analytics, I'd probably be disappointed. Better not to know. I can be hopeful all the way. The other one was to do some work with the TAs. So for the past about 22 years, we've initiated a TA workshop in the biology department, and twice a year with the instructors in our department, we run a TA workshop. and has a lot of different components. But in the past 2 years, I have spoken separately about my role as Associate Dean undergrad and student relations in doing misconduct discussions, and the value of having, of the importance and how that's a teaching tool, and how it benefits students to not be let off in first year because they migrate to third and fourth when they do have a 30% assignment, and kaboom, someone's finally going to call them on their problem, and they tell me, oh, no one's ever told me that. And in actual case, that may well be true in some cases. So not that that's the reason for making the penalty go away, but we'd like to avoid that. So the whole process here is teaching. And it also diminishes the value of a Waterloo degree if we graduate people that literally don't know how to work professionally. So that was part of it. So the TAs really picked up their game. And I also came up with a strategy that the Associate Dean undergrad, I do the investigations, she makes the decisions. So we came up with a strategy that we felt was a little more proactive. And what the normal penalty for plagiarism is 0 on the assignment, plus a 5% reduction in your final grade, and being put on disciplinary probation. So instead, one of the two most common problems that we have is students don't put any in-text citations in their document, or they don't even put a reference list, or they have troubles with this component. Think everything's common knowledge. Anyways, so as long as there was no evidence of real deviousness, I treated those as a reprimand, and so I send the students a letter saying they are given 0 on the assignment, so they lose their 5%, which is, first report, boom, I got 0. But instead of letting them kind of put that away and not really recognize it, I send them a little letter saying, guess what, I know you got 0, and I know why. And it's a nice letter. Doesn't say, and I send it along with a little PDF of maybe how to avoid that. And I say I'm going to keep that letter. And really all it means is if they come again, if they're reported by another instructor, they can't say, I didn't know. And that's all the letter says is, I know you've been told, and that's it. So that was a little way that I thought we were both kind of meeting each other in the middle. Dragan made very detailed instructions for how to do the lab manual, and these are also posted on SciSpace. The students had integrity training, so they had to read through this module that she prepared, and they had to get 100% on quizzes that evaluated their understanding of those. So some scenarios, you're working in the library, okay, is what you did considered misconduct or not? And really the important thing is to help students understand the consequences of the mistakes so that they can balance whether or not the risk of trying to do something wrong is worth it. No limit on the number of attempts, had to get 100%. And then we added using Turnitin in 2013. Students weren't, just as Vivian did, we did not have the students using access to their originality reports. But was more just, let's see what's happening. And in this course, really, we need some history as far as what reports are out there floating around. So it's not that useful we need a few years' time to find out what kind of activity is going on. In 2014, the students had the opportunity to have up to 2 drafts evaluated. And we provided a lot of training online, as Vivian alluded to. We also told them we weren't going to look in the draft box. Okay, so this was run as a pilot in conjunction with the Office of Integrity, as in a chance to see what's going on. And so we were not making any Policy 71 allegations based on what went on in the draft Dropbox this time. We put text on Learn as to how to evaluate Turnitin. I made a video. And the TAs talked about it in class, walked it through. We know fair number of students looked at those instructions. Not very many people watched my video, but you know, the whole right-click thing is, maybe I shouldn't speak like that. Sorry, you can unlearn, you can download, and we won't know that whether you download it. And to be honest, I only got that up there for the second lab report. So students had to indicate and agree to using Turnitin and indicate that they had read this and they understood what it was doing for them. Some of them thought this was a quiz and only picked a few, and so they didn't get access. So they had to answer this quiz correctly to gain access. So a few students in the class agreed to a few of them, but didn't. So the new rules that Dragonis got for the summer class is pick all three, the answer. Anyways, and then we asked them whether or not they were willing to allow us to use their feedback for these kinds of uses. Okay, so here's what happened. A lot of people used the Dropbox, the draft Dropboxes. Fair number used it more than once. And of this number, the report of the second draft went down. For some, it went up. Okay, so, okay. And you can see that this practice really decreased for the second report. So we felt that there was some learning there. A few people broke the rules and decided to submit more than 2 times. But you can see pretty modest out of a class of 900, like really can't get everyone to color in the lines. These unusual ones were more putting it in the wrong box. It stopped the second time. You know, these were the oopsie-doopsies. We did have 2 drafts and 2 submissions. So we felt that the scores going down was very helpful to the students who took the time to use it. Just wanted to bring one point forward, at least for our use in labs that are reused. We get very high scores just because, for just about everyone we'll get some score, just because of the terminology the reagents are used in the lab, and they're all reporting in some kind of table. The reagents are common and positive and negative. What can you do? So, yeah. So this is the big difference. You can see that 2012 we have 1 case, and in 2013 we have 76. But 68 of those were just warnings. Very few people did it again. Spoke to all of those, but those folks, I said, how many times do you think we need to tell you? Lots. That's the answer, lots. I said, okay. Big girl now, this is the end of the line. Some people, these are just excessive collaboration. They work together, different problems. So we don't mitigate all the issues, only the citation problems. But you can see we're getting a little better. Class size just as high. And so pretty happy with this as far as I'm not meeting with all these students. I offer to meet with them. Some of them actually ask to come in and go over it. So I do make myself available for that. But what you can see is the grades really dropped in the reports as far as the year we used Turnitin. But what we're really delighted with is the grades are going up in the second report. So we're seeing an improvement in the performance in the report, but maybe a little more accurate grading as far as what's being assessed. So students who used the draft Dropbox had a higher grade than those who didn't. We could say that those, we'll get to it, but those students may have been not doing it at 3 a.m. the day before, so they've actually put a little more effort into it. But really pleased to see that that's even getting better as time goes on. So this is a course that captures 70% of the incoming class in science, and so the plan between Dragan and I was, let's try and get them on board so that going forward we've helped a lot, or at least they understand the tool. I think it's really important for people to understand what that tool can detect, so that even if they didn't make a mistake, they will be comfortable when someone says to them in 3rd or 4th year, I'm going to check your group work using Turnitin. Okay, I understand what that can do, and I'm not afraid of that. So why do we have lower grades? Perhaps they're actually writing the reports themselves instead of reusing ones that we know that we can find. So the marks in the first lab report are, there's a little more effort. We're insisting on correct referencing, so students are losing grades if they're not doing that. And the TAs are more comfortable in bringing those cases forward. This is a big, big part of this, and so I think anyone who's going to use Turnitin, either the instructor themselves has to be willing to invest the time to look at those reports, or they have to train their TAs well. I would say even going through for this presentation, because we hadn't peeked in the draft box, and by looking at that, it's quite clear the consistency in the TAs is still not where it needs to be, and so that's something we're going to work on. So we're going to tighten up the integrity information to make it more accessible. When I looked at it, there's a lot of items there that tends to get people to say, well, let's see if we can do the quiz without looking. That's a lot to go through. We are going to look for misuse of the drafts going forward. And so I think that will limit the number of people who decide to put 3 in. We are going to award 50% of the earned grade instead of giving them 0, because I looked at a lot of those reports and some of them were just so beautifully prepared. And I just think it's the wrong message to tell a student on their very first report, that effort that you put into that is worth 0 for this little error. So if we continue on our path of trying to meet students halfway and recognizing the learning in this whole thing, I don't think their reports were worth 0. And we're going to deliver the reprimands in a paper format of the students that repeated this offense. Numerous said, oh, I didn't get your message. And recruitment has told us that students now like receiving paper, so I'm going to write the messages out and deliver them when they get the reports back. So those lucky customers will get an envelope. And we are definitely going to put more information in the TA workshop. I think I'm really going to work on encouraging the TAs to. It is really important to grade accurately, because even looking at second reports, when students come and say, I was never told that, talked to a student yesterday about this, and it's absolutely true. Ask for her first report, and the first TA never said anything. So I think if I'll be able to sell that to the TAs to recognize how unfair that is to the student. We will really be in a very positive position. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vivian, Barb, and Dragana, wherever she is.
Proctoring.
So we have lots of time for questions, and I don't know, Mary, have we got any from outside? Yeah, so.
I'm wondering, probably Vivian, you can answer this most. Did students come to you for help with how to interpret their originality report?
Okay, the answer is no. No one came to me to ask questions about how to interpret their originality report. I had not one group, yeah. Kind of wish that I might have, but they all seemed okay with it in the end. I think the document was really good, I think.
I think part of the one little problem we have with group work, and I'm really thrilled Vivian did this, because I think group work is the one area that a very well-meaning student can get caught, because one person in the group has a problem in their life and can't meet the deadline and decides to make it work for the team, but then the team owns the problem. I think only the person who submits to the Dropbox can actually see the Turnitin report, and I don't know yet.
No, it's a group Dropbox.
Right. They can all see?
A group Dropbox, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, because it's a group, they're group Dropboxes.
Super, because I thought
Yeah.
Sean said it, okay, good.
I think if you do an individual Dropbox.
Okay, so you have to really set it up and, ooh, you're good.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a lot.
So Barb, when the number of allegations went up, was that the first time that you were using Turnitin?
Yes.
Okay. And for your assignment, was it did students have the opportunity to submit more than one draft for you? And did they?
So the students did not have the opportunity to submit more than one draft. So that was a little bit of a difference between what was happening in Biology 130 L and my course. So for me, they had a one kick at the can for that draft version, saw the originality report, and then only one submission for their final version. And they, like I said, they weren't able to actually see the report that came from it.
Could they cheat? Could they?
Vivian, I was just wondering how many students opted not to hand their paper in via Turnitin?
So I, since implementing Turnitin, have not had a single group opt out of Turnitin.
I think that's what it's been across campus, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though I give them the option to, they've all just, yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, Dragana didn't have any.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions? I know Amanda has been working with Christine on a survey of instructors and TAs and students using Turnitin to get some feedback from them on the tool. I don't know if there's anything that you would like to share with us about that. That would be terrific.
So far, we've had a really good response rate. We sent our survey out to a total of over 9,000 people on campus, and I think we were almost at 9 or 10% of getting a response rate back. We had a very good response rate from instructors. So out of 119 instructors, we've had 53 report back. The majority of them are using Turnitin as a plagiarism detection device rather than an educational tool. I think some of them perhaps aren't well informed about the educational component. So thank you for drawing that to our attention, and hopefully more people will use it in that capacity. We will have a formal report once the surveys are all closed, coming up in the future. Another project that actually Christine and Barb and I and Jane are working on is looking at guidelines for originality reports. So we took other best practices and examples of how you look at those reports from an environmental scan and have refreshed the guidelines that CTE has on their website. We've actually made a quick guide as well, which is a really nice, simple tool to try and help instructors that might not have the time to dig through some more web pages to learn about it. And we've also created student guidelines, which previously had not existed. So I think this will be a nice resource for students. I know, speaking with the Federation of Students, they've said it's like sending your work into a black hole. They're not really sure what happens to it. So I'm actually quite pleased to hear that you didn't have any, or very minimal people want an alternative, because it is a bit of an unknown to them. They're suspect of what's going to happen with their material. So I think we can do a better job, and hopefully that's what the guidelines will do once they're released, is to inform students about what Turnitin can do, and really focusing less on the plagiarism detection and focusing on it as an educational tool for student success. So our goal is not to penalize, it's to educate and provide them with the right information and move forward from there.
I'm going to work on getting some testimonials from the TAs as far as their comfort level, and from students who have had some mishaps. There are a number of students who are very comfortable giving testimonials about their acts of misconduct and how it happened, in hopes that it will help other people. And so I'm going to collect a few that maybe we could use publicly.
Just a comment, kind of continuing what Amanda had said about the black box thing. Dragana did have a couple students just want to test it, I think, themselves, and they just copied and pasted stuff from the internet just to see. So I think that's a big thing that students really don't know, and that way they could see, oh yeah, it really does detect plagiarism. So yeah.
But last night we also found out one student had a report of 33%, no, 75%, then had a 33 but submitted the 75. So, I mean, there's like, oops, yeah. There's all sorts of checking going on.
So one of the things that strikes me is it's really interesting. It's so great to see the multi-pronged approach to getting the message across to the students, because I know that that information on academic integrity has been in the Biology 130 tutorials for a long time, and also the quizzes and so on.
Yeah.
And so when you think about like the number of different ways that message seems to have to be presented to kind of have an impact, that's very interesting. I mean, you know, you have to describe things a lot of different ways to have it come across. Apparently, yes.
One thing that's come up as far as looking into how to get students to really appreciate what academic integrity is that if their instructor actually takes the time to have a discussion with them about what that really means. So, for example, in my course, I'm going to expect that you use MLA or APA style. And that Wikipedia is not an appropriate reference to use in your paper. If students know that you care about it, then that dramatically decreases their the amount of plagiarism that you're going to have and academic misconduct. So as long as they know that it's important to someone and someone actually cares, then we do a great benefit to the students, and their misconduct really drops. So another point is, I think, again, from the multi-angle, you can't say it enough. Shockingly, we do have cases that we have third and fourth year students who just didn't seem to have the messaging. So it was really beneficial, I think, if instructors can test the water in their courses just to see the understanding as well, and then gauge what you need to add to that to try and help them understand would be very useful.
And I think, not to speak out of turn, but I think there's some interest in making a milestone for academic integrity training, is there not? Or for undergrads?
I don't know
Are
if
we moving?
everyone knows, but there is an academic integrity milestone for all new incoming graduate students. So it's a very brief quiz and learn, or course and learn. Maybe would take 1 to 2 hours maximum for someone to read through all the academic integrity content. And the quiz is only 12 questions. So it's fairly simplistic, and the goal is that every new incoming grad student would have a foundational understanding of what academic integrity is here, just in case they're coming from another country where the rules were slightly different, or perhaps their high school, whether it be in the United States or Canada, just didn't cover those kind of rules. So there is interest in having one put in place for undergraduate students. The bit of the challenge there is logistically. So in the fall, there's maybe 1,600 students that come in the Learn course, and I actually manage that course. So you can imagine with 6,000 incoming students as undergraduates, the volume there is going to be quite a bit different. The beautiful thing, I think, of the course is that it can be completed anywhere in the first 8 weeks of their term. So there isn't pressure when you first land on the ground here to finish this right away. We do want them to make sure that they have that understanding before they go into their second term on campus. So we'll definitely keep pursuing the undergraduate, and we call it a course instead of a milestone in there, just because it's easier to manage and learn. And of course, other faculties already have academic integrity milestones, which are different. They're specific to their faculty, whereas the graduate aim is cross-campus, required by all.
Sorry, I think we missed a lot of that because I didn't pass Amanda back the mic, but hopefully some of it came through. One other thing that I think is interesting about what's going on in biology too is that you've got first year and fourth year. It'd be so neat to see some of these activities in second and third year as well, and just to see what impact that could have on different courses.
I did in my distance ed version of Human Physiology, Biology 273. I did a very similar draft version, Dropbox for Turnitin, and final version as well. Class size was about 80 or so, and these were mostly first and second year students that would have been in there. So very similar, although I did have one case where a student submitted the exact same document as in their draft version that did have an issue into their final version. And yes, that was one, unfortunately, that did just not change it at all.
Should we get the mic to the right place so we can get your
It's
question?
just a semantic kind of question.
Yeah.
So the documents they're submitting to the draft box don't go into the Turnitin sort of master
Yeah.
overview. So it's
Yeah.
just an opportunity to use Turnitin comparatively and, okay. Because I
Yes.
was wondering how you would avoid
Yeah.
the draft looking, or the
Yeah.
final version
You-
looking
you-
similar to
yeah,
the draft.
you can have, it's, yeah, it doesn't get deposited in there, so.
So, not that it's statistically significant, but I'm happy to report that we do use Turnitin for upper year class, so the advanced cell biology class, and it has routinely had between 2 and 4 plagiarism cases per year for a 30% report, and we had 0 this year. So, okay, it's only 0 versus 2, and it's only 1 year, but it's going in the right direction. So those folks will have seen Turnitin before and maybe are deciding that it's not worth using old reports.
Good.
Just to clarify about the draft thing, the draft actually does go into Turnitin. But now it's supposed to be, well, there was an option for whether you compare another, like a version in like another Dropbox to that version of what was submitted. So both versions of the documents actually do go into Turnitin, but only one of them is kind of compared against.
Are you
So as long as it has the same name and author?
No, it's,
Change the title or change,
well, it's the way that Turnitin works. Like, and you know, we could talk about it after, but you know, both documents do actually go into Turnitin. Like it has to, the draft has to be compared to other things.
But nothing's checked against it.
Yeah, but nothing's checked.
So you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Basically.
I do have another question, actually. I'm curious about the, you had a quiz, like an integrity quiz.
An academic integrity quiz.
So was that customized for you? Did you create
made it,
that?
yeah. It's just cases that had come up, and then Heidi Engelhardt started it in Biology 130, and she's run it, I think, for maybe 3 years now. And basically, there's scenarios so that people could step away from just the rules and kind of say, oh, that was a problem. Yeah.
And I use a modification of Heidi's original
Yeah.
academic integrity quiz in my 4th year class. And it unlocks, taking that actually unlocks all of the assignment instructions, the drop boxes, everything. So they actually have to do that as a first stop and understand the ramifications of academic integrity, and then they can see the rest of the course.
I had a question about whether you use the functionality of Grademark in Turnitin in either of your courses.
We don't, but we're very interested in using it in the co-op marking. Or we're definitely. I didn't really appreciate all the features of Turnitin, but the macros might be very, very useful
It
in
would
the
be
marking.
useful.
So we have to work on the access. And it might be quite useful in 130 in 130L.
Yeah, that's one piece of functionality of Turnitin that we're investigating in the survey is the use of Grademark.
Yeah.
If anyone here doesn't know what it does, it essentially allows you to drop in standard remarks into a paper all online without having to download any of your papers. So you can mark on an iPad remotely. I'm not an instructor myself, so I'm not sure whether the comments are as broad as they need to be,
Yeah.
but you can also have the opportunity to leave an audio message to the student as well. And I know from reviewing some research that students appreciated that level of engagement, that their instructor took the time to either drop in those comments using Grademark or to leave them a voice comment.
I think we'll try and pilot it with a few TAs and see if they'll get on board. Co-op's using it for WattPD too. So.
And I've used it a little bit, but again, it's a little bit more on the functionality of those comments. And I found I had to customize a lot of comments.
Yeah.
And if I could just write them with a stylus, it saved me a little bit more time, I guess.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Vivian and Barb and Dragana and Amanda. Thank you so much for the session today. So it'll be up on the live stream site for a while, and we'll get this up on YouTube as well. So if people have missed it or their colleague missed it and they want to have a look at what we talked about today, we can make sure they get access to this session. Great. Thank you again.